That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Fairly alarmed here.
Welcome to MOTN Top 10, where we take some of the most controversial topics of the nerdiverse, some of the greatest, I would say, creations within our galaxy, and put them to the test. See which ones make the cut, and we'll see which ones don't. I'm, of course, your host, Mike G, and I'm happy to have on this section of the podcast a good friend of mine. I've seen him lift 100 pounds of flour over his head at the same time, whatever that means. Winter.
And that was my ex-wife.
Oh.
I don't know how that works. Yeah, you said you get rid of the trash man. Only hear about him in the news show. But guess what? Trash is everywhere. It infects. What's up, everybody? I am Winter, gamer tag, handle, Trash Monk. I'm coming at you at the studio that I record the Wisecast cross promotion there, and I am lit, fam.
He just drunk
this, bruh.
This dude just drunk 3-4 locos in a row, and he is lit, dog. He's ready for this episode, this top 10 episode, bruh. Right? We about to get it, man. You
Right.
You don't understand how long we've been wanting to do this episode. We've been kind of mulling over this for the past 2-3 months now. I want to say.
Pretty much.
Kind of just breaking my brain over this list because these were some hard cuts, man. Hashtag hard cuts, because this is a show that I grew up with, that my parents would make me watch, teachers would make me watch. I would watch it on my own. I have episodes committed to memory. This is probably some of the best television material of all time, I want to say, for what it's done for science fiction, for political drama, everything takes from this, don't you think? Like, everything takes from this.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the shows that have the anthology framework take a note from the Twilight Zone, just like a lot of metal bands take from Black Sabbath, a lot take from Twilight Zone.
And to think that this show was created really, Rod Sterling, really was a one-man band when it came to really laying out the details of these episodes, not knowing that he's providing the blueprint for decades of science fiction content. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and it never felt forced. It never felt kitschy or overly topical. It just was, you take from it what you want. It was a reflection of society, a lot of these episodes. And it was done with such a deft hand that it makes it timeless. You know what I mean? Like, you could show a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old these episodes and they would get it, because these stories are timeless and these anxieties are what's echoed even today in our society. There's some episodes of the Twilight Zone that are more pertinent now than they were back then.
Right.
You know what I mean? Kind of creepy. You know, it's like humanity's not learning from their lessons. They're only magnifying them. But let's get into these episodes, man.
Let's do it. I am locked, stocked, have 2 smoking barrels, and let's do this.
That's right, bro.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, man. Let's do it. So, number 10. Okay. Yeah, let's get hyped. So, I'll open my number 10 with one of my favorite episodes of the show. And like I said, this was a very hard list to cut down to 10 episodes because they're all so damn good. But I think I have perfected my list, and I'm very happy with the results. So my number 10 takes place in the 3rd season, episode 5. Air date was October 13th, 1961. And this one's called A Game of Pool.
Ooh.
Game of Pool. Do you recognize this episode, my good sir? Do you know which one I speak of?
Yes,
bruh?
I do. Jonathan Winters as Fats. Not Minnesota
Fats,
Fats,
man.
but someone else.
But James Fats Brown, bruh. And Jack Klugman as the card shark, Jesse Cariff. One thing about the Twilight Zone is that they had so many stars, and even young stars, that just kind of came and went through this show back in the day.
Right.
And what makes this episode so special is that there's been so much content built around it. Like, for those who don't remember the episode of Game of Pool, it's about a pool shark named Jesse, who's pretty much believes him to be the best pool player of all time. Right. But he's wrong. The best pool player of all time happens to be the character of Jonathan Winters, who's being challenged by Jesse to a game of pool. And through this game, what's so cool about it is that the Fats character is just dropping knowledge on Jesse. You know what I mean? He's just trying to talk him out of this obsession to be the best. And they're just having themselves. It's really just a conversation between two people. You know what I mean? And they set this crazy stipulation that if Jesse loses, he's going to die. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like your life is on the line. How badly do you want to be the best? Right. And so this is going back and forth. Fats is trying to talk to him throughout the entire match, just tell him you can quit anytime. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to win. You don't have to win. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
it's a great episode. There's several I would say, like, you step back in time sort of scenarios. For instance, a pool hall,
right?
would be one that,
right. Find one of those nowadays.
Yes, they're playing a style of pool that is not the common way of playing. I actually had to look this up back in the day. It's
right.
Yeah, it was considered the way to play pool back in the day because of like they had the racks of the points of how many points you've gotten in each game, and people would be playing for hours and hours. People don't do that anymore, but it's just a very classy look. There's interesting. I had this as number 3. Oh, no. I've revealed it. I had this.
That's fine.
Yeah, I had this.
Might as well put it out there.
Yeah. I had this higher
earlier
in my top
higher
5.
up.
Yeah, my top 5.
Okay.
Yeah, they really threw me, but yeah, Jonathan Winters.
So
is excellent.
Yeah. So we're going to obviously be talking about this later. So let's move on.
Yeah.
It's a great episode. Definitely made the cut. Absolutely made the cut. So, Winner, what is your number 10?
Well,
number 10.
I have to go with a classic for the Winter household. One of my dad's favorite episodes. It is none other than Production Code 173-3612, January 22nd, 1960 episode, The Hitchhiker, Season 1, Episode 16. Yes. This is my...
That's a creep. I love that episode.
Yes, my dad remembers as a kid watching this at his aunt's house and just freaking out in the scene. Taking you a step back, a lady is traveling to Los Angeles and there's an accident in the beginning, I believe, and throughout the episode she's being chased by this mysterious hitchhiker, similar to where a recent movie, I would say, They Follow esque. Would you say that They Follow kind of?
It's very you mean It Follows, the recent horror film? Yeah.
Yes. Without spoiling what the ending of this episode is, I think that's actually a good practice for a lot of these episodes. Don't spoil it. Just watch. You should watch this episode yourself. I'm sure you can find it on Netflix. Yeah, just to throw it out there. And I would say even listening to the radio drama itself, because it originally was a radio play, several renditions of it. Yeah, I would. Yeah, it is. If I could have a nostalgic, like, important for the winter household, this would probably be number one. But unfortunately, it has to be at number 10.
Absolutely, man. And just to give my little 2 cents on the Hitchhiker episode without spoiling it, it's that perfect sense of tension. I get echoes of Psycho.
Yeah.
You know, early on in the movie of Psycho, I get echoes of movie like The Hitcher, with Rutger Hauer, where our main character has this enormous sense of anxiety throughout the entire episode, looking over her shoulders, being pursued by the hitchhiker. And I would definitely recommend watching this episode because it's just one of those endings that, like you said, Winter, can make the whole house go quiet. You know what I mean? It just sucks you right in and then just breaks you down.
Right.
So it didn't make my list, I'll say that. But The Hitchhike, it is one of those that can be an honorable mention because it is an excellent episode.
Well, we both can't be perfect, so it's you can't
Hey
have it on the
man,
list.
that's why I love these. Hey man, that's why I love these. It spreads it out. So, speaking of which, let's move on to my number 9. Number 9. Now, this was. This is one I watched later in life, like as a kind of a pseudo adult, because it was impossible to remember them all as a kid. But this one just broke my brain for how much it kind of echoes what's going on now in the world, and just kind of how sometimes being too clever can be lethal. And this episode aired back in April 21st, 1961. This came about in the second season, episode 4. And I am talking about the Rip Van Winkle caper. The Rip Van Winkle caper. Do you remember this one, Winter?
Enlighten me.
Yes, this is a very awesome episode. Stars Simon Oakland, Oscar Berge, Lou Gallo, John Mitchum. And what this episode's about is that these guys robbed Fort Knox of $1 million, right? And it's pretty much just these bank robbers who have the perfect plan. So their plan is that they're going to rob Fort Knox and they're going to hide themselves in a cave in Death Valley, California. And the plan is that they're going to cryogenically freeze themselves for 5 years and wait until the heat dies down from that bank robbery. And once that 5 years is up, they're going to wake up from their cryogenic freeze and spend their money, spend their ill-gotten gains. What the trick is, which is not the spoiler, but the trick of this episode is that when they do wake up, many, many years have passed. Something was miscalculated, and they wake up a little bit further past 5 years. And this is indicated by the case where they look to one of the other tubes, one of the other time chambers, and a rock hit it during the time they were asleep, and the guy is just a skeleton. He's a bleached skeleton inside of his chamber. So they're like, what's going on? This didn't work.
Right.
And the crux of the episode is them trying to get back to civilization with all these bars of gold. And for anyone who's carried a bar of gold, they know that is the most unruly, heavy, uncomfortable thing to huff anywhere. Nevertheless, just bunched in your hand. So these guys are going through the desert. One has water, one has gold, and the guy is bartering the other guy's life for every sip is a bar of gold. And he's just torturing this man, being as greedy as possible. I absolutely recommend watching this episode. It's a 100% classic, and it's one that definitely made the cut because it's one of those I watch it every 6 months, every 6 months to a year. Perfect Twilight Zone in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I would put this in the honorable mention because this is one of those that I completely forgot about, but then once I remembered it, like, oh yeah, this is one that I've watched multiple times as well. When they do the 4th of July Twilight Zone marathon on Sci-Fi Channel, or when we would watch it for our drama class back in high school. So it's a fantastic episode. It's one of those you have a feeling. A lot of these Twilight Zone episodes, if you look at it in a writer's perspective, it could fit very well both as an audio drama, as well a stage play. It fits. It could fit several different storytelling mediums, I would say, and that's just the genius of the writing of Rod Serling. I would say.
Absolutely.
I would say.
I would say. I'll say it 5 times. Yeah, a lot of these shows could be easily put on Broadway. You know what I mean? Just be kind of cautionary tales.
Yeah.
And that's, like you said, it's so genius about this type of presentation is that they could be made with big, giant budgets of millions of dollars, or you can play this out in your backyard with a bunch of friends. It'll be just as impactful because the writing is that good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So definitely recommend the Rip Van Winkle Caper as my number 9, man. Number 9.
All right. Coming in at number 9 for Trash Monk over here, it is a production code 2621, November 1st, 1963, starring Telly Savalas, Season 5, Episode 6, Living Doll.
Ooh, Talking Tina wants to hear more about this episode.
Yes. So essentially, if I could break it down for you, it's a doll that the father believes that it's trying to kill him and turns out, or doesn't like him, then it turns into killing. And it's a very interesting concept. Because would you say that the doll is really trying to kill him, or is it all in his mind?
Right, because it's already
unhinged,
comfortable situation without the doll because he's the stepfather, right. And apparently the daughter does not like him or does not approve of him, and the wife is just really trying to balance everything out. And is it in his head? That's one of the questions that the show really puts on your head, because it's never overt. The doll doesn't get up and run around like Child's Play or something like that, right?
Right.
It's always in a stiff doll-like shape. And the audible sounds that are coming from it, he only appears to hear, right? No one else is reacting to it but him.
Right.
So the episode really makes you question your sanity as he's questioning his sanity, and him trying to explain to everyone, this doll needs to go because it's threatening my life. And everyone's like, you're being silly. Give your daughter back her toy. And he's like, no. And it paints him as a bad guy to his wife and the daughter, which is very awkward. You know what I mean? And it's that kind of anxiety of a man trying to make good with his new family, you know, and it really sets that up to where, are you going crazy, or is this doll legit from hell and it's really conspiring to end his life? Right.
And it's going back to how all roads lead to Twilight Zone. I would say there's at least 2, I wouldn't put Puppet Masters as inspired by it, but definitely Child's Play. And then there's also Annabelle that came out.
Yeah, and the killer doll.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, this episode came out even before the actual Annabelle doll was a thing.
Would have existed, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember as a kid, we had this thing called a My Buddy. And the My Buddy was a spitting image of Chucky. And I watched Child's Play as a kid, just like everybody else around my age. And my dad was like, check this out. And he showed me this episode of The Twilight Zone, and it blew my mind. I was just like, I thought this was like
Classic dad move right there.
Right?
Like, here's my son playing with a toy, by the way, that already has a weird name, My Buddy. It sounds like were you a single child?
Yes, I was.
Okay. This is coming clear. This is becoming clearer. Because I've heard some horror stories of parents buying dolls like this so that their kid would feel alone.
Yeah, man. It's funny because I used to beat up on my buddy because one, I didn't have a little brother to beat up on. So I used to
No.
tear into that thing all the time.
No.
Made his eye crooked, all types of crazy stuff, man.
I just
Like, real
picture
talk.
like metal music in the background going, I'm going to burn you, my buddy.
Yeah, Master of Puppets is playing as I'm just punching it in the gut quietly in a corner. You know? Because there were times where my little Michael imagination, that thing moved. Like it wasn't where I sat it where I remember it was, right?
Yeah.
And it's
it
that
moved to call child services on you, and you beat it up again.
Buried that bastard. But episodes like this, it's just that unsettling feeling of having this lifelike creature in your house, and you remembering, I left that in the kitchen. Why is it now in my bedroom? No, I threw that out. How did it get back in the house? And this episode is very, very, very well written, as they all are, and I think it's one of those that's an absolute classic. It's honorable mention. You can't defeat this just because of its raw creativity. Never been done before. You know what I mean? Cool. So my number 8 is a classic episode, which may be somewhere on the lines of your list, but who knows? Good thing about Twilight Zone lists like this is that you have so much source material to pull from.
Uh-huh.
And this episode was a first season banger. It was in season 1. Debuted November 20th, 1959. Stars Burgess Meredith. And the episode is called Time Enough at Last. Heavily parodied. Often copied. At last. My love has come along. So we meet a farsighted bank teller, avid bookworm Henry Burness. Works at a bank.
Uh-huh.
And he's doing his thing, and pretty much cataclysm happens. It's the end of the world, pretty much. Back during when this show was made, we had the atomic bomb scare, and everyone was afraid that within a seconds someone was going to drop a bomb on us, and that was it. And Twilight Zone played a lot around with that fear of atomic destruction. And what this episode tells us that this lowly bank bookkeeper, bookworm, was the last man on Earth for himself. He began to become quite kind of content in that, which is it's a very morbid idea about this episode. And of course, I can spoil the ending, which everybody already knows, but
You're right.
It's one of those that I'll just leave it up to you. This is maybe the first time you've ever heard of this episode, so definitely check it out. It is a Twilight Zone classic. Absolutely.
Yes, I have this at number 2, in fact, for me.
Wow, there you go. That's what I'm saying, right? It's an amazing episode.
Mm-hmm. So I'll leave my comments for then.
Perfect. So, what's your number 8 looking like?
My number 8 is another warm memory. It came out January 29th, 1960. Production code 173-3627. I already said the date. Season 1, episode 17, The Fever.
The Fever. This one doesn't come to
mind. Do you
mind.
remember this episode?
No, man. It's not coming to mind.
Well, this connects a certain theme that I like in a couple of Twilight Zone episodes where, if you think about it, it leaves the answer of whether this was real whether this was real in like reality or whether this was real to the person, and you're seeing what this person is seeing. So therefore, you're experiencing the reality that he is facing. If that makes sense. So this episode essentially is about a couple who they hate gambling, but I believe he wins a contest that takes him to a casino, and then he's given a coin by just some random person, and then he puts it in the slot machine, and then he gets addicted. Like I'm talking, he spends all this money, and the very end of this episode, I won't spoil the end, but he essentially goes into like a manic, like crazy state where he's dreaming about slot machines coming to his room, chasing him around, telling him to spend more money, that sort of stuff.
Wow, man.
And the episode never really identifies whether this is happening in the real world, where these are real slot machines going to get this guy, or this is just all psychological, which I find is interesting. And it goes like this is less of a science fiction type thing, but more of what I like shocking suspense stories, where it's more of the demon is inside of you rather than out of you. Right,
man. And this like with the episode I mentioned earlier, this is one of those episodes that just flew past my radar. I don't remember it, so I'm definitely going to make a note of this one to check out, because this is the beauty of the Twilight Zone. For every gem, there's another gem just waiting in the shadows. You know what I mean, to educate you and kind of make you think. Because none of these episodes there's a couple that are fairly actually scary, but there's a lot of them that make you think. And I think those are the ones that really stick with you. All right. So let's go on to my number 7. Seven. Now, this is another episode that I kind of caught later in life, but was just so cool that it just stuck with me ever since I saw it. Maybe I was like in my early teens when I saw this episode. Just like you said, on Easter when they do the Twilight Zone marathon, they rotate out some of the episodes. This one came out and just broke my brain because just how nutty it was. And this episode aired. This is another season 1 right out the gate, episode 28. Air date was April 15th, 1960. Starred Larry Blyden and Sebastian Talbot. And this episode is called A Nice Place to Visit. A Nice Place to Visit.
Nice Place to Visit.
Are you familiar with this one, Winner?
I should be.
Cool.
I've seen a lot of the earlier seasons. Shut you. Sorry, I should try to mute that for you. Folks of the show, they know that my phone goes off regularly. Okay.
That's all right. As long as we get sponsored by Old Spice eventually, you can let it rock, my good sir.
Yeah.
You can let it rock, my good friend. So I'm just going to give you a brief explanation of how this episode went and why it's so cool. Francis Rocky Valentine is a thief and a murderer and just an overall scumbag. He's robbing a pawn shop and he's shot down by police. He's gunned down. And he wakes up in the afterlife and is greeted by a gentleman. And he's saying, okay, welcome. You've passed away. And I'm here to answer every beck and call you have. So Rocky is like, okay, I guess I'm somehow made it to heaven. And he wins at everything. He has all the money he's ever wanted. He has all the women and cars and lives in a solid gold house and wins every gambling game he can think of. Hits a perfect, hits a perfect shot in pool, wins every card game, has the best luck in the world. And this is all fine for a while until time starts passing by. And he starts to question, like, I know me. How did I end up in heaven? This isn't the place for me. And this episode stuck with me because it really gave a morality tale of what do you really want in life? You know what I mean? If you're given everything, if you're giving anything you wanted, is that as good as having everything? And it just made me think, like, we really don't know what we want as humans. I mean, we want to be comfortable. We want ups, but we also want downs. Anybody with a perfect life will tell you that it's boring. It's dreadfully boring without the struggle. And a nice place to visit is one of those episodes that really hit me as a gut as I was kind of finding my way and becoming a man and kind of figuring out, how do I take these losses? How do I take these victories? And it's just a very strong episode for me. It's just one of those that I'll never forget. I'm not going to give away the ending as we're doing for this episode, but I definitely recommend you check it out. It's a very fascinating character study on, people's wants and needs,
Yeah, and what's interesting, what I like about it is the guy who plays Pip, I believe in the episode, the quote unquote guardian angel, is Sebastian Cabot, who is a well-known actor. I would say he plays the a portly character in almost all his things that he does, if you know what I mean by that. Yeah, he I don't know, he would be he's just like, if you're looking for like a fat man that sounds funny, or like, whoa, whatever do you mean, sort of thing. I think Sebastian Cabot would be him, or like the guy that goes, yes,
yes. He's the guy from The Simpsons. Yes.
Yeah. So man. Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out this episode.
Yeah, man, it's an absolute classic. It's one of my favorites. Absolutely. But
I think I have you beat though for number 7. If this is a competition, tell us in the show notes. This is a episode from May 4th, 1962. This is none other than the classic The Dummy.
Ooh, that is an honorable mention. So
yes.
I'll let you take
like
it.
I would put
episode.
Right, like I would put a nice place to visit in my honorable mentions as well. But The Dummy is probably one of my favorites because, again, you don't necessarily know if this is a psychological horror or not until like the end. And even the end, it could be construed as this is all in his mind. He feels like the dumb. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil the ending. But it's pretty much a ventriloquist who is suffering from a very common issue that those practicing that have, which is having a very weird relationship with your ventriloquist dummy.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then Twilight Zone-y stuff ensues. And I really don't want to spoil too much about this episode, but I'm saying go see it.
Yeah, that is definitely one that was one of those that I had to arm wrestle off of my top 10 list because it's so good. And it's such a good, it's such a good fake out. I'm not going to spoil it. It's so good. It's a super, super good episode.
Yes. Cool. Another one of those that could be like a play with just 2 people on stage, really.
Right, because it carries itself. You know what I mean? It carries itself so well. The back and forth, the drama of it, it's just so powerful. You know what I mean? Oh man, my number 6. Right. My number six was one of those I used to watch all the time as a kid. That used to freak me out because the actual effects of it were so good and the actual story was so good. And it was just actually scary to me as a young tyke, little Mikey Short Pants. In this episode aired in season 2, episode 6, starring Maxine Stewart, Donna Douglas, and Edson Stoll. And this episode is called Eye of the Beholder. Eye of the Beholder.
That's a good one, I believe.
Yeah, man. This is one that deals with Janet Tyler, who's in the hospital, and she's covered in bandages. And all the doctors are trying to fix her because apparently she was born with a mild deformity. And in this form of society, either you have to conform to how people look, or you're sent to like an island where all the maldeformed people have to live, kind of like you're a Morlock, so to speak. And Janet has gone through 11 cosmetic surgery procedures to try to get her to look normal, but none of them have took. She just still doesn't look quote unquote normal enough to fit into modern society. And this is her final chance to look normal. And this
Right.
episode echoes how people feel now. You know what I mean? This episode echoes how people have felt since the beginning of time, you know, just not feel like you're fitting in because you don't look a certain way. You're not presented a certain way, that you're shunned by society. And in this episode dares to invite you to think about what it takes and what it really means to quote unquote be normal. You know what I mean? And we're following this no spoiler rule, but the climax of this episode will really kind of bake your noodle on and make you do some kind of internal governing of just like why is society like this, and what can we do to make it better. It's just one of those episodes that stick with me because it's such a commentary on all things, especially now with the advent of Instagram and Snapchat, and everybody's their own Cleopatra. Everyone wants to be absolutely perfect and beautiful. But what does that actually mean for those who are just normal, quote unquote, or for those who aren't normal for that matter? Are they really outcasts? It really makes you think, you know what I mean? So Eye of the Beholder is just an amazing Twilight Zone episode to me.
Right. It's a great episode. I'm going to put that in my honorable mention category.
Yeah.
And definitely say that I'm going to have to look this episode up in my Twilight Zone companion book that I have.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember. I can't remember like the origin story for Rod Serling. I thought it had something to do with him in a store and like watching advertisement. It's something I don't recall. But yeah, check out the Twilight Zone companion book. It's surprisingly one of the few ones out there.
Wow, you would think, right? There'll be a lot more information on this.
Oh, so I guess I should go next. Mine is from season 2, episode 29. I believe that was the end of the season for season 2. That's correct. June 2nd, 1961. The Obsolete Man, another Burgess Meredith episode.
I'll just say that this is higher on my list. I'll say that.
All right. Number 0?
Number -5. But I'll let you take it. I'll withhold my opinions till later.
Well, it has 2 of the like American TV classic people in it. You have Fritz Weaver, and then you have Penguin, Mr. Penguin. Did I say it right? My brain's dying.
The Penguin, yeah.
The Penguin, Mr. Penguin. Yeah, Burgess Meredith. Yeah, don't give me flack for forgetting the Penguin, okay, people?
Just making sure.
Yeah.
Got to cover our bases here.
Yeah, but don't send me messages on Twitter about that.
Yeah.
I got other stuff to message about. Okay, moving on. So this episode is very interesting. It's to me because there's a lot of a lot of work was put into making this episode. A lot of themes that were addressed at the time that were super important. You're talking about the Red Scare, communists everywhere, Rod Serling in a clever way making a dig at communist witch hunts in America at this time, as well as like talking about the importance of reading books. Once again, Burgess Meredith, who was in the Time Enough at Last, playing a character that's reading books and has it a very he holds it important. And I think Rod Serling did not do that just out of a whim. He's talking about like the importance of a society needing well-read people.
Yes, absolutely. And that was a big thing for the time, was the conformist appeals of, the big Red Scare, right? The communist scare. But I'll definitely leave my comments on this one till later because, man, this is one hell of an episode. it's one you can like show kids in school. You know what I mean? It's that of
Right.
important of an episode. It's just so good. But I think we're moving on to my number 5. Number 5, and this is a fun little episode that I found that made it higher on the list than I thought it would. But I just thought the meaning behind it was so damn cool. This one was a season 5 edition, late in the season, episode 25. Of course, this one was called The Masks. The Masks. Guest appearances by Robert Keith, Milton Selzer, Virginia Gregg, Brooke Hayward. This is a nutty episode because it really plays to that awkward time in everyone's life where family has become, where family can and sometimes do become the worst with the introduction of death and facing that death, and people's ugliness begins to show. This episode's about a wealthy man named Jason Foster, who is indeed dying. He's on his deathbed. He's hours away from death. So what does he do? He invites his children to stay with him in his last hours, right? Now, his children are the archetype rich snub jerks, right? The girls of his family are all snobby, big giant, fur-wearing socialites, and the sons are just the worst, spoiled, rotten children. So the father says, okay, this is what we're going to do. From midnight till morning, you each have to wear these masks, and we're just going to wear them all day and air out our grievances. So each mask represents a face of the true self of the person who's wearing it. So the old man, he dons the mask. He dons a skeleton mask, of the mask of death, representing his short time here on Earth. One of his sons dons a glutton mask. One of the other daughter dons like this puffy, ugly mask. And the father's just tearing them down throughout the entire episode, talking about their shortcomings, how they failed him as his children, and how he fears for his legacy, knowing that they will move on through life with his name. And we're not going to be doing any spoilers for episodes, so I will leave it at, this is a very interesting episode to watch to kind of get a full idea of what goes on and how these things can bring out the worst in people, and how who we are is often buried under our own personas. You know what I mean? And this episode kind of shines a nice bright light onto that. Is this an episode you're familiar with, Winter?
I've never seen this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's actually one of my absolute favorites. It's so good. It's so well written. Like you said, this episode could be on a stage, you know what I mean, and done as a play, because it's so simple. The premise is so simple, but the writing and the acting and the staging of the scenes is so well done that it stuck with me all these years. The Masks, I definitely recommend it.
All right, I'll definitely take a look. I think my list leans towards more of the earlier episodes of Twilight Zone, so I do need to check out some later episodes. Yeah,
man.
Starting my top 5 would be another classic. You're looking at 1960, and Rod Serling is cited as saying this is his favorite story. I believe there was an issue that he didn't like how the script came out, but his favorite story from the first season, and this is none other than A Stop at Willoughby.
Ooh, that is actually legit one of my honorable mentions. That's legit one of my honorable mentions. I love it. I'll let you take it. We can gush about it because it's not on my list, but go for it. What's this episode about? Tell me about it.
So this episode is about, I would say, a midlife crisis gone insane. I would best describe it.
Yeah,
where a guy just like loses it as his job, and his brain, like he's on a train and he keeps going to this place called Willoughby, and he keeps like get transported there, like what would you call it, Wizard of Oz style.
He's in like a causality loop, right? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. And there's an amazing twist at the end that just like combines these like subtle connections to, like, they didn't need to add certain things to the story, but since they added it, it made the story 10 times better. Like the name of a particular thing at the very end is actually part of the like the twist at the end of Twilight Zone.
Right.
And it's amazing. And this is another, like, goes back to a recurring theme in my list. Is this really happening to him, or is this just him going crazy? I think this is one of the better examples of him actually going crazy.
Yeah.
Yes, like if this was going to be written today, if Jordan Peele did a remake of this for the new Twilight Zone, it would probably not have as many science fiction elements to it. It would just be him going insane.
Yeah.
And this is how his insanity looks.
To him.
But there's also and there's like other themes of like how do men handle working in the workplace, which is a foreign concept. Like there's no like if you look in history past, there has never been something like a cubicle, an office space,
right,
until like fairly recently when compared to other stuff. So it's like human beings adapting to that life, and some human beings cannot handle that, and they go crazy.
Straight up, man. And it's this is one of those episodes, man, where it's like really plays with your head, because by the end of it, I thought it was real. I thought he was really stuck in his causality loop, but I'm not going to give away the ending. But like Winter said, it's just one of those episodes that really play with you, and you really see the breakdown of a man. You know what I mean? You see him lose his mind in the most eloquent fashion, and him finding his eureka. You know what I mean? His Mayberry, as it were.
Right.
You know, does it?
And it's like, if you look at what is the ideal life of a 60s night, or like in that era type of life, and it would be businessman for an you just look at Mad Men.
Yeah.
Just look at Mad Men. And yes, and this guy has everything, but he still is unsatisfied. I think that's another thing that Sterling does very well, showing that you can have everything but still be missing something. Great episode.
Great episode, man. Definitely not made my list. This is why I love doing these, is because it's such a breadth of different types of genres that we're going through, and our lists are for the most part fairly different. You know what I mean? So
yes. Now, let me ask you this: were you a fan of The Outer Limits? I think this will answer. A lot. See, that's the difference. I would watch The Outer Limits, but I didn't like much of the creature feature type stuff. Same thing, like we've talked about how in the X-Files you liked the Creature of the Week, Monster of the Week episodes. Mm-hmm. And I was more into the mythology. Yeah. I was like one of the 5 people that enjoyed the mythology of X-Files.
See, and that goes to my creature effects side. I'm always been more, how did they do that? Yeah. That's so cool looking. And shows like Tales from the Dark Side and Monsters and The Outer Limits really played with that creature feature more than Twilight Zone, which were the social commentary, mostly morality plays that I've been mentioning. And that's what makes this show monumental. You know what I mean? It makes it stand out amongst the pack as the best collection of science fiction tales on celluloid. You know what I mean? So absolutely. So, wow. My we're in top 4. So let's talk about my top 4. My number 4 This episode is probably one of the more quintessential episodes to date. If you say Twilight Zone, you'll say this Twilight, probably. This was aired in 1962. This was a season 3 episode. Appearances by Lloyd Bachner, Richard Kell, Susan Cummings, Joseph Ruskin, and of course, I'm talking about To Serve Man. To Serve.
Oh.
Man. And this is another episode, kind of like the episode I mentioned earlier with Burgess Meredith, where you probably have already heard the spoiler to this 100 times over because it was so heavily retread and satirized. But when this came out, this was also on the cusp of the Red Scare and everyone being afraid of uniformity and the unknown. And this episode talks about a race of aliens that come to Earth and seem to just answer all of our problems, right? They show up and they solve our energy crisis. They stop the Cold War. They unite all nations. And everyone's kind of suspicious, of what their true intentions are. Aliens don't really want anything in return. They're just like, hey, we're here to help, guys. We'll solve all your problems. No, this tome we have, please don't decode it. You don't need to know what it says. Just know that it says to serve man.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those episodes that was effects heavy. That kind of freaked me out as a kid because I didn't like because they're like 9 foot tall alien looking dudes. And I didn't like it as a kid.
They used the guy who played Jaws, right?
Yeah.
I believe.
Or I think they used the guy who played Lurch in the old Addams Family episodes, I think. But
let's take a look at this.
But this episode was a trip because of the stinger and because of the false hope of foreign invaders. You know what I mean? It kind of reminds me of how Spanish sailors came to the shores of Mexico, and the Aztecs thought these people were gods. They're showing up with their boats and their white steeds and their fine linens, but no, we've come because we want stuff. And this is one of those episodes that it's timeless because they can, like you said, Jordan Peele or John Carpenter or any director can come and remake this episode, but it just wouldn't have the panache of when it first aired. So I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, the Richard Keel played.
Yes, that's Richard Keel, absolutely. So no spoilers. Top 4 episodes of all time. It's a classic. Would recommend this to everyone and anyone who wants to get into Twilight Zone. This will be a nice episode to cut your teeth on. Very good episode.
Yeah, and it goes back to another interesting thing about Twilight Zone is that Mr. Serling was not afraid of having unresolved conclusions to his to the episodes, meaning that the good guys do not win at the end.
Well, mostly the good guys don't win.
Exactly. Compared to other things on television at that time, it's a very innovative evolution, I would say.
Yeah, because that wasn't the case. The Cowboys always beat the Indians, unfortunately. The good guy always won, right? The monster always died at the end of the horror flick, you know what I mean? But no, Twilight Zone was like, no, either I'm going to give you a bad ending or I'm just not going to give you an ending and just let it rock and let you imagine what's going to happen next. And I think that's what's really the staying power of this show. It's because a lot of the times it just opens up for communication and opens up for discussion that lasts forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure each one of these episodes have been dissected by scholars and students alike, just trying to really break down what the possible exits of these little, filmettes were, so crazy stuff, man. Cool. So what was are we on yours right now?
Yeah, this is. Sorry, I got distracted.
No worries,
there.
man.
Oh, jeez. This is number 4 on my
Number
list,
4.
coming at you from season 1. If you might notice, I am a fan of like season 1 and 2, probably out of the entirety of Twilight Zone. 1960, January 15th, episode 15. I shot an arrow into the air.
I have no idea. I do not remember this episode, dude. Oh my goodness.
Well, this is like classic to me. This is if there was enough room for all, like yeah, it is a classic. So essentially it is 8 astronauts being shot into space, and then they land on what they believe to be an unknown asteroid. Okay, and it's essentially following the plot of another one that you mentioned, where like they're tracking the desert, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like the one, like the
Rick Van Winkle caper, right?
Yeah, it's like this could have been like filmed the same day, if I'm being honest. And I think I'll have to spoil this one. Yeah, so the astronauts pretty much they die, they start like losing water, and then it pretty much ends with like one astronaut alive, and he's just trying to crawl his way, and they're like, we're here on this planet by ourselves, and it's just the fight keeps going, and then this one guy who's alive climbs over a mountain and sees a sign for Reno, Nevada. Yeah,
that is so good. Oh man, that is super, super good, dude.
And it's typical. It doesn't. Yeah, like he doesn't. He just starts breaking down, crying.
Yeah,
and
because you wouldn't know the difference, right? Like you super wouldn't know the difference.
Right, and I have to read the closing narration here. Practical joke perpetuated by Mother Nature and a combination of improbable events. Practical joke wearing the trappings of nightmare, of terror, and desperation. Small human drama played out in a desert 97 miles from Reno, Nevada, USA, continent of North America, the Earth, and of course, the Twilight Zone. That sort of thing.
Awesome.
And it's like
awesome, dude.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about, man. Like I probably seen this episode 100 times, but it just didn't stick in my brain like the other ones did. And that is just brilliant. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just too good. It's too good, man.
And it's like, again, there's some connections to the movie Forbidden Planet in this. Like some of the equipment that was used from Forbidden Planet was used in this episode, if not just imitated. There's like clear, like they just spray painted some boots silver for this episode.
Yeah, right.
This was filmed in Death Valley National Park, and also. What was the other thing? This is a good example of Rod Serling. He writes the teleplay. There's other examples of this that I mentioned, but he writes the teleplay, but the story was already done by someone else.
Yeah.
But he's able to transform it into an actual play.
That's what I'm saying. Like, would you go see a Twilight Zone play? Like if they just every night was a different episode, same cast, just playing different roles? Like, I'm surprised no one's done that before. They probably have. And I just don't know about it. I'll be the first in line. Oh, man. We've hit our top 3, man.
Yeah.
Top 3. We're starting to get to the deep cuts, man. And I wrestled with this list for almost 3 months now. And the top 10 weren't that bad, but the arrangement of those episodes was the hardest part. In this episode, literally made it like at the 0 hour. Like I boosted it up because I felt that strongly and how it was well written. This episode debuted in season 2. It's a season 2 banger. April 28th, 1961. Starring Liam Sullivan, Franchot Tone, Jonathan Harris, and this one's called The Silence. This episode is called The Silence. Does this ring any bells for you, Winter?
Not really, to be honest.
This is why I love this stuff, man, because we're bouncing episodes that are like rubbing shoulders with each other, right? They live in the same season,
yeah.
But we just like, I don't know. This sounds like, and it'd be like your first time watching it, right? Like it's super cool.
Yeah,
you're gonna experience this for the first time, so no spoilers. But this episode's about a room full of aristocrats are sitting around, right? And they're all talking about their stocks and being big, rich money bags, right? Smoking their cigars or whatever. And one younger guy, just won't shut the hell up. He's talking the most crap. And the monarch of the group says, you know what? I will give you $500,000 if you can shut that mouth for a full year. If you just shut up for a full year, I will give you $500,000 right now. And the young guy is like, you know what? I'll take that bet. So the old guy's like, all right, I'm going to set you up. So the old guy inside the country club sets up a soundproof room that has microphones all over it. And the guy has to live in this room for a year. And they set him up with food, with entertainment, but he just can't talk. He can't say one word. And if he does, the deal's off. He loses. But if he wins, this old guy has to cost him $500,000. And he's doing it. Like months are passing. He hasn't said a recorded word, not one. And the old guy is losing his mind. He's going insane on how this guy is doing it. How have you not whispered something in a dream? How have you not accidentally stubbed your toe, and said something? You haven't said a word. How are you doing this? And the whole episode circles around this bizarre situation where this guy is going to win under abnormal circumstances. It's such a good episode. I keep saying that, but I'm sorry. This is my number 3 because it's just so nutty on exactly how the spoilers go for this one. And you're like, damn, okay, I see how that worked out. But yeah, The Silence. I definitely recommend this episode. It has some of the best writing. Once again, you can throw this on a stage. It would just fit perfectly. You know what I mean? Easy peasy, just as entertaining. Check this one out. Season 2, classic. Amazing.
All right. My number 3 is, of course, one that we've already talked about, A Game of Pool. Jack Klugman, Jonathan Winters. I chose number 3 because I'm personally am getting into pool playing, and it's just been on my mind a lot more recently, and it keeps coming back. I like the idea that there was an alternative ending in the script for it, right, that would have made this a lot darker, in my opinion. Yeah, we already talked about it that much. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
I know that just if we're not doing spoilers, man, it's just a mind F. You know what I mean? It's just really like, dude, like that's a pretty. What is being the best worth? Right? How much does it mean to you to win? And a lot of people are just so stuck on that they are willing to forego mostly anything. But yeah, I think we've said our piece on that episode.
Yeah, and this brings up like another thing in Rod Serling stuff where he's like, I want to say like using like pseudo religious Christian undertones. I don't like this was still during the era of like you're mentioning the devil and like going up to heaven, but you're not necessarily like
mentioning the devil,
like preaching about it, or like you're these are like characters that you're using.
Exactly, that's what I mentioned earlier. Like this has political overtones, it has social overtones, it has spiritual overtones,
right?
But none of them beat you over the head. You know what I mean? It's not saying be afraid of your government. It's implied by the writing and by the storytelling. You know what I mean? It's that don't be afraid of the devil. You better be good. It's not telling you that. It's not forcing it down your throat. It's implying it, which is why The writing on these episodes are just so superb. Speak of the devil, let's go into my number 2. And this is probably my dad's favorite episode. Like you mentioned earlier, you had an episode where it's like your father's favorite episode. This is my father's favorite episode. And this is the one that gave me nightmares as a kid. It literally shook me to the bone. This debuted in season 2, episode 5, guest starring John Carradine, James Carradine's dad, I believe, Robin Hughes, H.M. Wynett, and this is The Howling Man. The Howling Man.
Ooh.
Do you know of this episode winner?
Not. I don't think so. Like this is sick. I don't know much about the titles except for the ones that I looked up.
Straight up.
Some of these, yeah.
So I'll break this down. So this story takes place. It's a flashback, and this takes place during World War I Europe, right? And there is a man named Ellington. He's lost in a storm, and he seeks refuge in a giant old castle in the middle of I think it's like Germany during World War I. And the head of the castle is a monk who's played by John Carradine, I believe. And he's like, yeah, if you want to just stay the night, we'll feed you, we'll put you in some dry clothes, and once the storm is lifted, you can go about your merry way. And Carradine's like, bet, thank you. You know, I didn't want to have to die out there in the infinite tundra. But the entire time he's there, he's hearing this howling, this woo, woo. And Carradine's like, what is that? And the monk's like, don't worry about it. He's like, don't worry about that noise, man. Just go to sleep, you know? Right. And we come to find out that it's a man. It's a man trapped in this castle. And this guy is like, these guys aren't what they seem. They plan to kill me. You need to rescue me and help me escape out of this castle. And he comes across Carradine, and Carradine's like, I don't know, man. These dudes are feeding me, and they seem pretty much on the level. And man is like, no, you have to believe me. These guys are animals. They're going to tear me apart in the morning. You have to let me go. And like you did a spoiler for one. If I may I spoil this one, because the spoiler for this is phenomenal. So the guy who's pretty much captured in a cage is only held by a wooden stick holding the lock in place. And the bars are fairly wide to the point where if the guy wanted to, he could just lift the stick and just get out of there. And Carradine notices this. So the monk comes by and says, leave him alone. Don't talk to him. Don't talk to him. He's the father of lies. And Carradine's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, have you noticed that there's been peace in the world since the ending of World War I, and everything has become nice and simple and civil? It's because we've captured the devil in this castle. That man you see before you is Satan himself, incarnate, and because he's captured, the earth is at peace. We must leave him captured forever, because if he's unleashed back into this world, chaos and war and famine and everything will continue to go against man. And of course, Carradine's like, get out of here, man. Like, you guys are in here crazy. Like, I don't believe you one bit. So Carradine goes to sleep. And of course, as the night goes on, that howling continues. That whoo, whoo. So Carradine's so irritated, he goes downstairs and he talks to the Howling Man one last time. And the Howling Man is saying whatever he needs to say to get out of his confinement. And Carradine's like, well, you know, right. He's just like, well, why don't you just lift the thing yourself? He's like, no, man, you have to do it for me. I'm weak. I can't lift this stick. Just please remove it so I can go. So Carradine finally breaks and lifts the actual stick up. And the last second, the monk goes, oh God, no, what have you done? And the door flies open, right? And this frail man is passing through these pillars, and it's lit perfectly to where for each pillar he passes, he starts to change and it starts to begin a metamorphosis into a literal Satan. He becomes Satan himself. Like you said, Sterling with the spiritual allegories. And he just, in a puff of smoke, disappears. He's gone. He's free. And the monk is like, what have you done? And of course, right at this point, World War II starts, 1949.
Right.
You know, so the monk says, you are now tasked by heavenly doctrine to go out into the world and recapture the devil. This is your job now. Since you let him out, you got to go get him. And the guy's a total believer now. So he spends all of World War II hunting down the devil across the world and finally captures him in a hotel room for all places. Has to stick over the hotel room door. He's going to leave for the night before they both fly off to wherever to send him back to the castle. The cleaning lady comes to the room, starts cleaning, starts to hear the howl, and walk towards the door. It's one of my... And I'm going to do the closing narration as you did for yours.
Cool.
You can catch the devil, but you can't hold him long. Ask Brother Jerome. Ask David Ellington. I was saying Carrington's Ellington. They know, and they'll go on knowing to the end of their days and beyond in the Twilight Zone. One of the coolest episodes ever. My father's favorite episode.
Right.
I want to say, and my second favorite episode of all time. Classic. I absolutely love it.
Now, do you know what the connection this episode has with Kill Bill?
Is there a Kill Bill reference? I didn't know that. Enlighten me.
So one of the actors in Kill Bill is David Carradine. Carradine, of course, is in Kung Fu. His brothers are also all actors, but their father is named John Carradine, and his father plays Brother Jerome. Yeah, in this episode,
absolutely. John, he's the father of David Carradine, and
starring Kevin Bacon.
Absolutely. So that's my number 2. It's my man. Every time I think about watching Twilight Zone, this episode has to be watched before I turn it off. Best episode ever, other than my number 1.
My number 2 is Time Enough at Last. We talked about this already. It's also interesting to talk about how this episode deals with suicide. Not only could this episode be a play, it could be a one-man monologue if you do it right. Really. It's fair. Once again, it's like it pretty much was a stage play. This takes place on a sound stage. If you look at the background and the way that Burgess Meredith reacts with his scenery, making it look like he's walking down this road, but if he did, he would be hitting a wall, painted wall. Just a fascinating exploration that I think filmmakers should watch, philosophy students should watch. It's excellent.
It's excellent, right? And like it made my list because it's like you said, it's a one-man show. And Burgess Meredith just kills it in this role. And like you said, it could be done. You can just monologue this if you do it right. And it's an exploration of the solidarity of man, the comfort of being alone, and the loss of all you really need. All he ever wanted to do is read his books, and what you start really looking at yourself being alone. I'm not alone if I have something to read. Oh, jeez. My number 1 goes back to one of yours, but I would like to kind of talk about it a little bit more. And my number 1, my favorite episode of the Twilight Zone is The Obsolete Man. It's my absolute favorite. Burgess Meredith, man, he owned the Twilight Zone during this time. This episode, once you really start, the more you think about it, it's like it's almost uplifting in a way. Because we're in a situation, like you said, this has a lot of allegories to communist kind of ideals, and you have become obsolete. You're too old. You're too dumb. you're too fat, you're too slow. We're just going to do away with you. We're just going to kill you. And in this episode, the rules are you die live on TV for our entertainment, right? You choose how you want to die, and we'll set you up, whatever you want. If you want to be poisoned, you want to be shot to death, you want to be mauled by a bear, you're going to die when we say you're going to die, right? Come to terms with it. But Burgess Meredith gets the drop on his would-be executioner and traps him in the same room with him that he is set to explode. And the entire time they're looking at the clock, the executioner is going through all the 7 stages of death. He's going through depression, he's going through bargaining, he's going through fear, he's going through anger. And Burgess Meredith is cool as a cucumber. You know what I mean? He's just talking back to him. Hey, man, Is this how you want to be when you die? You want to show the people of the state how a real man dies? How a real man dies with dignity? Are you going to die with? Are you going to be seen blubbering like a baby, screaming for salvation? You see, I'm going to die on my feet. I'm going to die doing what I love. How are you prepared to end your life at the end of your life? How are you going to go out? And for me, growing up, it's like live your life with the dignity that you would if this wasn't the situation. You know, pressure can either make a diamond or it can crush you to pieces. And this whole episode's about pressure, right? It's about the pressure of your own mortality. It's about the pressure of maintaining a facade that you've built in your comfort. Everybody could be a badass until things get real. You know what I mean? Everybody's a tough guy until it's time to be tough. Or everybody is responsible until that responsibility really hits. And this episode, to me, is the perfect metaphor for how are you going to present yourself at the worst of situations? What legacy are you going to leave at the end, knowing it's your end? How do you react to that? And Burgess Meredith, just in his whole speech was about that. Are you going to die a man of the state? Or are you going to die a coward? Because I choose to die a man. It's just a good episode. I can just talk about it all day. But that's my number one. The obsolete man. You are obsolete. That's me.
Yeah. Somehow we have missed, we haven't even touched on my number one.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just jumped ahead. I was just so excited. My fault. What is your number one? We'll close on yours.
Oh, no. No, we're still in the pattern. I'm just saying, it has not come up it did not come up in your top 10, which is interesting. This is March 4th, 1960. The monsters are due on Maple Street.
You know why that didn't come up on her?
One.
Because that's my number 11 honorable mention. Such a good ass episode. Sure. Take it away.
Yes. So, in continuing with my theme of a lot of the episodes I've chosen deals with McCarthyism, Red Scare. This episode is probably the best, up there with the obsolete man and talking about crowd justice, a crowd mob mentality, I would say. The hunger of the masses. Pretty much the power goes down and the kid reads about an alien invasion taking a place, and then weird stuff starts happening in the neighborhood. And I don't want to spoil it for anything. Well, actually, I will talk a little bit about this spoiler, but you'll have to get the rest of it. So I do have one problem with my favorite episode, but it just doesn't make sense for a modern context where it dives in a little bit to what science fiction does. A trope would be whenever you're adding aliens and you're trying to bring a message across, aliens are always going to represent, of course, something
Right.
alien, a foreign
Right.
entity coming in. So, in the end of this episode, you have aliens being responsible for whatever is happening in the neighborhood. If you want to find more about that, you got to watch the episode, guys
and ghouls.
guys and gals. Guys and ghouls. What's up, germs? Ladies and germs. Yeah, and you don't necessarily need that. Like, the episode would have been good without them in it. Like, I've always said that this episode would have been good if they made it into had like the government being responsible for this. But guess what? They did that in the Twilight Zone remake in 2002. Instead of aliens, they made it the government. Specifically United States Army, experimented on how small towns would react to terrorism.
Man, that's kind of creepy. And you mentioned this, and without spoiling this episode, it reminds me of something the late, great George Romero talked about when he created Night of the Living Dead, was that my movies, this is what me paraphrasing him, my movies aren't necessarily about the zombies. Mm-hmm. This could be any external threat. Exactly. It could be zombies. It could be aliens for this case. It could be the government. It could be monsters. It could be werewolves. It doesn't matter. What the true story is how people react and deal with this new phenomena. Do they deal with it? Do they not deal with it? Do they deal with it violently? Do they try to deal with it civilly? Like, how are people reacting to this new norm? And that's where this episode really touches on things like in The Obsolete Man. It's about pressure. You know what I mean? It's about putting groups of people, civil people, quote unquote, under a pressure and seeing how they act. You know what I mean? I'm not going to give away one of the major things of the story of why there's pressure, but these families go from, hey, Bob, want to have dinner tomorrow, to I have a gun. I make the decisions. You know what I mean? Like, it gets really hairy, and it's a scientific experiment on humans pretty much going from zero to pharaoh given the situation. Because I'm a firm believer that if something was to jump off tonight and things just got real, humans would eat each other, to quote, the Joker. In civilization, in civility goes right out the window. You know what I mean? The moment that comfort zone is destroyed, and we're fighting over water, we're fighting over basic stuff, guys. We're fighting over water. We're fighting over shelter. You know what I mean? Over food, over transportation. It becomes really ugly when we all don't have enough to share. And that's what really is the horror of the monsters that live on the monsters on Maple Street. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Great top 10 from both of us.
You know what? I applaud you, man. This episode was a revelation because it put me on episodes I've never heard of. It reminded me why the episodes I've chosen were good choices. And I think I want to close this kind of retrospective on Twilight Zone and get your opinion on the movie. Did you dig the movie? Twilight Zone, the movie?
Yes, but the movie was trying to go for a different effect. I think the movie specifically chose more of the creature feature episodes more because that would translate better
on screen.
I think that would or on screen, and people are willing to sit down more for a creature feature like film instead of like a heady heady episodes.
If you can pick one honorable mention that didn't make either of ours cut, what episode would you bring up?
Well, it is interesting that neither of us picked either of the William Shatner episodes of Twilight Zone. I particularly like the Nick of Time episode where they have a fortune teller machine, and you can actually buy your own fortune teller machine.
Yes, and they were stuck in that diner because the fortune teller machine was the vaguest thing in American history, where it was like, will
Mm-hmm.
we live today? It depends. What happens if we leave? Only time will tell. And William Shatner was so engrossed in this thing that it was deciding their decisions for them. It's such a good episode. And I'll mention the other William Shatner episode, Nightmare at 2,000 Feet, where it's another iconic episode where William Shatner, this is another episode like you mentioned. Is it all in his head or is this really happening? You know what I mean? The plane, he's on a plane. He's looking out the window. He thinks he sees something. He's already manic before this even goes on, right?
There's a man out there.
There's a man on that plane. Is it there? Isn't it? You have to watch the episode to find out.
Yeah. It looks to me like it's a guy wearing a shag carpeting, but
yeah, it looks to me like, Will Ferrell's out there with his curly cues.
Right.
Oh man. Any passing thoughts on Twilight Zone as a whole before we close this bad boy out?
They could really teach a class on it, I would say. I'm an advocate for more Twilight Zone in the schools, teaching curriculum around it.
Yeah.
Kids don't read books anymore, so just show them a Twilight Zone.
I mean, print out the scripts, man. Make them do little stage plays. You know how cool it would have been if we were like in the 5th and 6th grade and got to do Twilight Zone on stage? That would have been awesome, man. For me, at least.
Right.
If you want to do the lighter episodes, do the lighter episodes. Teach the kids something, and they'll also get their little acting props.
Right on, man. Right on.
I recommend this show to anyone. If you're 50 years old, have never seen it for some reason, or if you're 10 years old or 11 years old, you just happen to come across this episode of our MOTN Top 10, El Capitan. Check out these episodes, even the ones we spoiled, because you'll be blown away by how well they stand up to this day, how well they hold up to this day. And I believe that The Twilight Zone is one of those shows that's going to outlast us and teach lessons and innovate filmmakers and creators until the end of time, man. If you've liked this content and would like to support us monetarily, please visit our Patreon, which is located on our website, mastersofnerdiversecast.com. $1 a day $1 a month is available and awesome. $5 a month would be great. It will open you up to additional content that's for the show that's not publicly given. And if you want to support us non-monetarily, leave us a comment. Let us know what your favorite Twilight Zone episode was. And I promise you, I'll have something to say about it. And you can find us on Twitter. I will let you know. At MNerdiverse. And you can also find us where podcasts are played. May that be iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Spotify. Check us out. I've been, of course, your host, Mike G.
And I've been Trash Monk. Aye.
Sorry if you're listening to this on 10. And I will always ask you to look towards the skies. Look towards the skies.